I want to discuss today about the ego, and I wanted to talk about how we're double-faced people, all of us. I think I like to say double-faced because we have duality in nature, and the ego is the regulator of duality, and the ego is always trying to convince us that we're separate, that we're different, that we're better, and we're threatened by the other. We are in fact spiritual beings. I don't say that. We are energy beings. And there is no separation. There is only one consciousness. Now, people ask me, what is ego, right? And what is our true nature? And what is the other? And I say double-faced because one is the ego, right? And the other is what you actually are, or what you should be striving to attain, why we're here on earth. I made a list that I want to talk about because I hate the ego. I hate anything that relates to the ego. I talk about ego as part of the conscious mind. The ego is part of the false self. All of us have ego, and some to more extent than the others. And the ego is one of the worst things you can possess in life. And actually, life will give you back. The more ego you have, the more your life is not as good, let me say. But you will discover this in time. A lot of people are unaware. But anyway, talking about the ego. These are things that I try to work with on a daily basis to improve myself. And I hope a lot of people would do the same thing I do, you know, to work on their stupid egos, because I really hate the ego, anything but, you know, living in this world, you can't help yourself but have an ego, but the most important thing is to try to diminish it, to make it as you know, not to be as ego as much as possible. So, the ego is when we see things that you know, we create separation from things. That's part of the ego, you know. You know, you're Muslim, I'm a Christian. You know, you create a separation. It's part of the ego. Blame. It's your fault because, you know, you should have come here at 7 and we're late and then we lost the flight. Blame. That's part of the ego. Being hostile towards another person, being angry, you know, having resentment, hating somebody, resenting them. You know, why did she have to do that to me? She did a very bad act towards me, and you know, I resent. My God, pride. I hate pride so much. Pride. Being proud, thinking, you know everything. No room for open-mindedness. Having such a huge pride. Complaining, and I do that a lot. I complain a lot. I complain a lot. That's so bad, but I do. I always complain. I complain about life. I complain about how things are. I can't accept the fact that life, you know, why can't it be so beautiful? Why it can't be in such a nice little place? Why it has to be surrounded by all these egoistic people? I just can't accept it, and I complain about it. Another thing, jealousy. Oh, how much I hate jealousy. Being jealous is part of the ego. In anything, whether you see somebody and you're jealous of what they look like, whether they look much more pretty than you, envying them, it's part of the ego, a big insecurity. Anger, when you get angry, it's part of the ego. Thinking that you have power more than others, you know, political figures, you know, all part of the power struggles. Materialism, you know, thinking, you know, I've got more money than you. Who do you think you are? You're shit. You don't have anything. I do. Look at me. I control the world. I've got money. War. Jesus. War. That's the number one ego. No love in there. Nothing. Ego. War. It's so negative. Coldness is part of the ego. Not opening up. Being warm. Being open. Believe it or not, another part of ego is living in the past or thinking about the future. Yeah? It really does have to do with the ego a lot. When you're thinking about your past, you should actually be staying in the present, living in the present. Another thing that's part of the ego is intolerance. Not being able to tolerate people. Not accepting them for who they are and trying to change them to who you think they should be. That has to do with ego, and it's within you. Self-importance is also part of the ego, thinking that you're really, really important and the others are not. So giving yourself more credit than you should. And when we really need to talk about us a lot, it has to do with part of feeling self-important. And sometimes it can become a lot of an ego. It's good to find yourself important, but not to over self-important yourself. Whereas you feel superior to others. Egoism, part of the ego. Self-denial. Somebody tells you something, you're like, no, it's not the way it is, and it's like that, and you just can't come to terms with things, and you're always denying and blaming others. Social intolerance. When you meet somebody, and you might not like them, and you're saying, oh, she's this and she's that, and I can't accept her, and what the hell is this, and that's part of the ego. Now, on the contrary to our ego, let me talk about our soul, okay? What we were destined to be, what we should be aiming for, how we should be to make this world a better place, and ego-less, ego-free, ego, whatever you want to call it. All right, so our soul is part of our true self, right? This is how we were born with, and ego is what we learned to be. So what is the soul in opposite to the ego? Well, it has to do with we. It has to do with cooperation. It has to do with coming all together. It has to do with unity. It has to do with understanding, being empathetic, right? Being friendly towards other people. It has to do with forgiving anything they've done to us. Because, we all know that's a lesson. And we need to forgive and move on. The soul has to do with love, giving and receiving love. And I'm not talking about romantic love here. I'm talking about real love within the planet, within the being, within the people. I'm talking also about gratefulness, being grateful for what you have, what you don't have, being grateful for what you have. I'm talking about happiness, being happy, living in the present. Being humble. Being humble. Where has humbleness gone to? Being spiritual. And I'm not talking about being religious or, believing crazy things. I mean, okay, you can believe whatever you want. It's in your right. But being spiritual. Being loving. Being, believing in something, in love. Spiritual, for me, has to do a lot to do with love. I don't believe in religions. I don't believe in a lot of things, but I believe in myself, and I believe in love. That's the most important thing for me. The love of the world and giving and receiving love. What else? The soul has to do with wisdom, getting wiser, learning about life, why we're here, what we're here to learn. Why do these people come in our lives? Learning from the past people that have been writing books, and we read so much stupid things and junk, and we deal with what we wear, where we're gonna go out, how we're gonna dress, blah blah. But we fail to become wiser, to learn more about our life. The soul has to do with peace. We've got to have more peacemakers than troublemakers. Look at all these people in history, what they've done. They've been to jail, they've been mistreated, all for peace, for a better world. Also, our true nature has to do with being sympathetic about the other person, being in sympathy, relating to them. Our soul has to do with a new orientation. Sometimes we can see things in a different eye, being more open-minded. What does open-minded mean? Open-minded means keeping your mind open, right, to any new thing you might hear, and at any given time you can change your mind. I mean, do you remember when you were young until now, how much you've changed? I did. I remember if you told me things like 8 years ago, I would say, what the hell was that? But now, because I'm changing and I'm learning, I'm evolving, I'm learning new things, I have an open mind to open and listen to anything, right? I try to be not trying to be firm with what I believe. My mind is open to accept new ideas, new things I've never heard about, and I adjust and I become a new, different person every single day by learning new things. The soul has to do with tolerance, being tolerant towards people. They might be going through stuff that you're not going through, and sometimes if we are not put in their position, we have no idea what it's like, and for them to be going through that lesson and for you to encounter them might mean that you might have to be more tolerant. There's weaker people out there, there's angry people out there, there's people that are unjust, they're not fair. They do a lot of injustice, but we need to learn to be tolerant towards them. Another thing is we have to find within our souls, why we are important as human beings, because we are, each and every one of us is important. Even what we regard as wrong or right, we are all there for a reason, and both are needed. And we need to put the self-importance, how important we are, and everyone is needed out there. There's no one person now that's on the planet that's not needed. Even the people we consider bad are needed there for a reason. But if we don't go within the wisdom to find out why these people are needed, we're never going to find the answers, right? And we're always going to be blaming external forces, and our ego's always going to be there. Another thing which is very, very good to have is self-acceptance, accepting. And I have this issue a lot, that I don't accept injustice. I don't accept lies. I was born with this, and I have a very hard time accepting people that don't want to change themselves towards the better. It really affects me. It really bothers me how people only think about, they don't care about developing this planet, and it really bothers me. Like, really, I can't accept the fact that that people are not the way I am. That's an ego. Yeah, I really can't accept the fact that they're only thinking about themselves, and they're not compassionate enough. They're killing the animals. They're not loving enough. They treat people like shit. Because they don't see within themselves, right? And I can't accept that. And that's part of my ego, And it's slowly telling. I'm accepting people, but I'm still not there yet. Another thing that's part of the soul is social acceptance. Accepting things how they are in our social environments, right? It's very, very important. Part of our true self also is simplicity. Being simple, accepting everything the way it is, non-complex, because life is simple. But we make it so darn complicated. Life is really, really simple. And another part of the true self is just living, just being, just be, right? So I've discussed now, I discussed the ego and the true self, and I hope a lot of people will start, seeing, trying to diminishing that ego, for God's sakes, because it's the destruction of the world. If more people will take the time to look within themselves and change their negative, I don't want to call it negative, but their own weaknesses, we would we would have better changes in the world and better people, and it will just flow much better. And that's all I've got to say about the ego. So guys, have a great day and thank you.